By the mid-1950s, the USSR became a behemoth of tank construction. Countries of the socialist bloc operated tens of thousands of cheap and effective T-34s, T-54s, and T-55s. At the same time, NATO member states were more about quality over quantity, relying on expensive vehicles produced in fewer numbers, like the M60 tanks. In the early 1960s, the US decided to double down on that approach and adopt prohibitively expensive but also highly advanced main battle tanks. As suggested by US Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, the US entered into a special agreement with West Germany to launch a joint project to create a true tank of the future, known as the MBT-70 in the US and the KPZ-70 in Germany. German engineers had a lot of experience building tanks, and having just finished their work on the Leopard, they were eager to reach new heights. Granted, they already had a bad experience of taking part in a joint initiative to develop a pan-European tank, which imploded under the weight of numerous disagreements, but that didn't deter them from trying again. The good news was that there were a lot of things that American and German engineers agreed on. Thanks to a 1,500 horsepower engine and a relatively low weight of around 46 tons, the tank would be more mobile than any of its rivals. Spaced armor in the front could protect it from 105mm sub-caliber rounds and heat projectiles. Its hydro-pneumatic suspension with adjustable ground clearance allowed the tank to have a low profile, on par with the Soviet T-55 or T-62. Finally, engineers planned to mount a remotely controlled machine gun or an autocannon on the vehicle's roof. But then the cracks started to show. Americans wanted to achieve the long-lasting dream of tank designers and house the entire crew in the turret. Furthermore, they wanted to equip the vehicle with a 152mm gun/launcher, which could use the Shalala missile. The German side was not entirely on board with the idea of placing the whole crew in the turret, and they had their own gun, a 120mm long-barreled cannon. The first prototypes were built in the late 1960s, and they immediately revealed several flaws of the original design. Crew members often complained of disorientation when the turret was rotated, even though adjustments were made to eliminate the effect. The German 120mm gun turned out to be more reliable and effective than the American gun/launcher combo, but the Rheinmetall autoloader that the engineers planned to fit in the turret proved to be prone to failure. The American autoloading system was considerably more reliable, but slower than its German counterpart. Finally, the tank turned out to be 5 times more expensive than originally estimated, making it prohibitively costly for both countries. In 1969, the US decided to effectively drop out of the project. The Germans decided to pour their remaining resources into developing the Keiler, a tank that was supposed to be used in combination with the MBT-70. The German 120mm gun was accepted into production as RH-120 and proved to be an excellent weapon that was used for many decades. The Keiler also became known as one of the best Western tanks. You probably know it under its other name, the Leopard 2. All the while, across the pond, Americans were doing their best to make the MBT-70 at least somewhat less expensive. The experimental XM803 received a streamlined turret that was cheaper to manufacture, a more powerful domestically produced engine, as well as a few other improvements. But the vehicle was still so expensive that Americans had no choice but to abandon the project for good and start from scratch with a completely new MBT, the future Abrams. Even though the MBT-70 was never used in actual combat, tanks of the series are available in War Thunder. You can find them at Rank 6, both in the German and the American tech trees. Even though the German KPZ, the American MBT, and the slightly cheaper XM803 are quite similar in many regards, there are still quite a few key differences between them. The XM803 is one of the first modern MBTs made by the West. It comes with a pretty powerful gun with good elevation, and it has enough armor to be safe against older heat and APHE shells, as well as some subcaliber rounds like the 100mm 3BM8 APDS. Adjustable clearance allows the vehicle to quickly traverse maps riddled with bomb craters and trenches, like Berlin. The XM803 can be played pretty aggressively, but it can also be a decent sniper or an ambusher. Basically, it'll fit almost any playstyle, but you still have to remember a few of its peculiarities. For instance, your auto-loading system is so slow that a lot of Western tanks that reload manually, as well as Soviet vehicles with carousel-type autoloaders, will reload faster than you. Another thing is that you can't be fooled by the sheer caliber of your gun, as the 152mm rounds of the XM aren't very reliable in terms of either penetration or damage. Sometimes it makes more sense to just fire a Shillelagh. When you're down-tiered, you can play the XM even more aggressively. It's somewhat unique, in a way that the only thing that an enemy can hit in the front is its fuel tank, as all 3 crew members are positioned in the turret. We suggest that you should only bring enough rounds to fill the rack in the turret that feeds directly into the autoloader, which gives you 25 rounds. You should also be extra careful on hillsides. For tanks of this series, that is a position that is just as dangerous as it is advantageous. The older siblings of the XM, the MBT-70 and the KPZ, are both more capable than their more realistically priced sibling. They're both equipped with 1500 horsepower engines, and their gunners have access to optics with good zoom. Both have an RH-202 autocannon on top, which is not only effective against helicopters, but can also destroy enemy barrels with a few well-placed shots. Naturally, the increased combat capability of the MBT-70 translates into a higher BR. If you're up-tiered, you might have to face modern tanks like the Leopard 2A4 or the ZTZ-96A. If you run into them, be very methodical. Try to hit them only in their weak spots, like the LFP. The German variant also has a bit of an advantage in terms of firing speed thanks to its faster autoloader, as most of your opponents, with some very rare exceptions, take more than 6 seconds to reload. Finally, both the MBT-70 and the KPZ-70 are fitted with an advanced hydro-pneumatic suspension system that allows them to tilt their hulls, which can give you a unique advantage on hilly maps. Just don't forget that all of your crew is in the turret when using this feature. The MBT-70 never made it to the battlefield, but it'll certainly be remembered as one of the most ambitious tank projects of all time. The good news is that in War Thunder, you can actually take this very expensive toy to battle and see how it compares to other vehicles of the Cold War era. Do you like using the MBT-70? Share your experience in the comments below.